do that during the video, Culero, that... Okay, so you can just keep it like that for right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. All right.
Yeah. Okay, so...
welcome back, everybody, to Dude and Really.
You just flat out interrupted me. I was like, so you just took it over. You freaking megalomaniac.
I felt like it was molasses on Monday when it's 70 degrees outside. I wouldn't know it was like 30 degrees outside. It was like,
dude.
Nice.
Really?
Oh, really?
That's good.
Really? Coulero's joining us again
Yep.
in the studio. The bullpen, if you will. That's a bull, right?
Oh, goodness. See what climate change has done to his brain?
Holy shit, it's hot in here.
Okay, so speaking of which, there's our segue. This is about the scam that is called climate change. And I've been reading on this for a decade plus, the insanity of it.
It's not a scam. Yesterday I came outside, 35 degrees. Today I came outside, 60 degrees. Climate totally changed.
Excuse us for a second while Damon leaves
While
the
somebody
room.
explains to him the difference between climate and weather.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh,
Thank you.
those are different.
Thank you, Calero. Appreciate the clarification on that. So the whole thing is a scam and has been for a very long time, even before Al Gore took his pudgy ass up a ladder with a little pointer.
The inconvenient truth, everybody. Yeah. Inconvenient.
Where did he predict we'd all be underwater by now or something?
We'd be
I
underwater.
think every 22 years they do that, right?
Yeah, we'd be underwater, and the polar bears will have disappeared from the North Pole.
Yes.
And they've doubled. The population up there is doubled.
And it just continually, the goalposts keep moving. Mm-hmm. I wish my bank account was the same way.
And even NASA says that for the last 8 years, the Earth has been cooling just a tad. But why haven't you heard from the climate change fanatics in the last 8 years?
Because cow farts.
That's not where I was going with that. That's not what I was looking for with that. But yeah. So the whole thing is a scam. And if you do a bunch of research on this, you realize it is a scam. And this guy right here, Richard Lindzer, I think is his name. This guy.
I haven't met him yet.
Yeah, he's 83 years old. He was a professor, atmospheric professor, physics and everything, the real deal, at MIT from 1983 to he just retired here this month, I think it was, for 40 years.
Hoorah, tenured man.
This dude knows his shit. I mean, I've watched a bunch of these guys who refuted the climatologists, the corrupt government-controlled climatologists, but this guy's the best. Now, this short little video, we're going to react to like 2.5 minutes. He doesn't go into all the numbers and everything. I just want you to see the gravitas of this guy and what he says about other scientists, which I find really fascinating. Before we get into it, I just want to say that in all my studies, and looking on both sides, is what I found is that it's just frankly too complex for anybody. And he even says this. You can't even say that CO2 is a warmer or a cooler of the atmosphere. In fact, he says it's both. Below the CO2 warmer, above it, it radiates. And he goes into a bunch of this. He says the two main things that cause warming are ocean water vapor, the expulsion of CO2 from the ocean, and the sun. But anyway, there's a bunch of aspects on this. But he also goes into feedbacks. And feedbacks being if there's more CO2 in the atmosphere and plants that love CO2 use that CO2 and then turn it into oxygen after they use that in sunlight, what's the feedback there? And science still doesn't know. They can't even quantify how much more extra foliage there is on Earth, and there is by NASA photographs. They can't even quantify how much the photovoltaic organisms in the ocean, how much they absorb the CO2 and then spit out oxygen. So there's so much involved in this, and the list goes on. It's hundreds. So the honest scientists, like Richard Lindzer, say this. And he's, from all the people I've come across, this guy is the bomb. He's done more studies on this than anybody. So anyway, this is what he says. And I haven't seen the whole thing. I've only seen like the first minute and a quarter. So anyway, we're going to watch this. Y'all can watch with us. We're going to pause if if somebody wants to make a comment, so y'all yell pause and I'll pause. Let's back this up. Okay, so here we go with, I think it's Richard Lindzer.
Dr. Lindzen, you
Lindzen.
delivered a presentation today where you spoke about several narratives relating to climate change in general and carbon dioxide in particular. As someone who works in the sciences, what does it say about where we are today that you delivered a presentation about narratives?
Well, it says that science itself has become sort of a slight irrelevance, that stories have been promoted over the last 25, 30 years.
Isn't he so calm? I just love, he's not trying to make a big point or anything. He's just like, it's like what he has learned from watching corrupt scientists spew nonsense.
Well, this has been promoted propaganda.
Yeah, I just love how easy he is about the whole thing.
And they have completely redirected the science. But more to the point, they've also followed Eisenhower's warning that fundamentally, as the state monopolizes the support of science, it calls the shots. And so you have the scientists on the one hand, on both sides, presenting, I would say, not particularly alarming scenarios, but then you have the body politic presenting something that does not, by and large, have the support of science.
Okay, so I like this point here, in the sense that even on both sides of the discussion, they're stating somewhat the facts, and neither one of them, as he says, is particularly alarming.
Yeah.
Even the acceleration of CO2 in the atmosphere. The scientists themselves are like, even on the bad side, on the leftist side, are like, well, this may lead to higher ocean levels and stuff like that, but it's the politicians at the international climate
That weaponize it.
They weaponize it and are exaggerating it and cherry picking it.
And that's where the cow farts come in. Like, if we don't do something now, we're going to lose California and Florida and a good portion of the eastern seaboard. Because of the ocean rising, because of all of the glaciers that are melting on a yearly basis. As a matter of fact, we're losing penguins and polar bears. They're just dying out in the thousands.
Mm-hmm. And a good example, I agree. And a good example of this also was the whole Al Gore inconvenient truth thing, where he showed in that graph the rise of CO2. But he made the graph so long on a geological period, you couldn't really tell that they found out later that the rise in CO2 came after the warmth started. The warmth actually warmed the oceans, and the oceans released the CO2 into the atmosphere. Mm-hmm. So that he reversed cause and effect with that graph. That's politicizing. This is what he's talking about. That's politicizing the actual information.
The end of the planet. But resting assured that the science won't complain.
What is the cost?
What he means by that is, maybe you already know, but the science is just science. The science is the facts. If you get down to true science, there could be a bunch of brouhaha about speculation, but the science isn't going to complain. Here's the facts. Mm-hmm. And I like how he said that.
Of the politicization of science.
Well, it's many things. I mean, I don't think any field survives this degree of corruption.
Wow.
Without losing, if nothing else, its self-respect.
Thank you.
But in terms of climate science, I think it's set back the field probably a few generations. I mean, it forced it into a channel that was not describing most of past climate change. And so instead of trying to figure out how the Earth behaved, the field was co-opted into a situation where it was supposed to support a paradigm that the government wanted, or that the environmental movement wanted.
That's elegant.
Hard to disentangle the two also, because the environmental movement itself has become highly political.
I just find this fascinating. What did y'all think? Any comments?
No, definitely. Not really. I mean, it's exactly what it's exactly what we talk about all the time. I personally don't know the direct science behind it. I know you've done much more extensive studies and research on it than I have. To me, it never seemed like it was plausible. To me, it never seemed like whenever I sat there and would hear these alarm bells, that I would get the feeling that that there was a call to action. Like I'm a father, I'm a parent, and I want what's best for my children. And if I felt there was actual actionable data, then I would of course do my part in order to ensure that I leave a non-deteriorating environment for my children, because that's what I do as a parent. That's my obligation and my joy as a parent.
If there was something actually coercive happening.
Yeah.
But as we're sitting here, we're expelling CO2.
And we have been doing for quite some time. And yes, the population of Earth has grown, but what you're talking about switching one mammal for another at that point, because before there were herds of other mammals that were outside, pooping methane,
But
all that good stuff.
One thing, several things that the left don't mention, the furry left, is that right now the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere is very low. It borders at 280 parts per million. Plants start dying around the Earth. The voltaic organisms start dying in the ocean. Those two things are the only things that expel oxygen into the atmosphere for us to survive. It goes down below 250 parts per million, we start dying because the plants start dying. No plants, no humans. So we're only in the mid 400s parts per million right now. This is geologically one of the lowest points of CO2 in history. The ideal level, and this isn't something that's argued about. Both sides agree. In fact, greenhouses do this. The ideal level for foliage is 1,200 parts per million. We're sitting at 450. So it's almost 1/3 below the ideal level. And as an example, back a couple 100 million years ago, when trees grew 2 and 3 times taller than now, and foliage was 2 and 3 times taller, the parts per million was 5,000 on CO2.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it was huge. And as an example, there's almost no CO2 in the atmosphere right now. It's a trace gas. It's a trace molecule. Per 10,000 parts in the atmosphere, it's 4. 10,000, it's 4. Nitrogen is 7,800. Oxygen is 2,100. So there's barely any CO2. There's barely enough for plants right now. So if these environmentalists really cared about the world, about the earth, they would want there to be 3 times more CO2 in the atmosphere. They would want it to be a little bit warmer for plants because warmth is good for plants. So the hypocrisy.
It's the hypocrisy for me.
is truly mind-boggling to me. And
The warmth is good for human flourishing too. I mean, I'll remind you, we're between ice ages.
we are. Well,
When
we're actually
civilizations come up.
I thought so too, but we're actually not between ice ages. We're in the middle of an ice age. It just so happens it's a warming period in the ice age. We're still in an ice age. The Earth has been in an ice age for about 20 million years. And it's kind of done this, but it's not like before 20 million years ago when there were no polar ice caps, folks. That was before the ice age started.
So essentially, we're not going to have a ice age, or we're not going to have polar ice caps anyway, simply because of the cycle of the Earth. So eventually, the ice caps will melt.
Well, if it keeps,
Once the ice age melts.
well, the vast majority of the Earth has been without ice caps. So yeah, I mean, if it keeps going that way,
Yeah, I don't
then
ever remember Pangea. Like whenever I saw things for Pangea and stuff like that, like seeing like ice caps.
there weren't
and
any
stuff.
ice caps.
Yeah, like
And they know this. The thing about this is the corrupt scientists who Mr. Lindzer talks about is that they all know. But what they want first is money. They want government money. So they're lying. They're outright lying so that they can get money.
In order to get us battery operated cars and all this other crap that's ridiculous.
Wind
It's absolutely
farms,
ridiculous.
solar farms, so-called, and all of this. It's just absolute hypocrisy, lying, and so the government can be in charge of all this. That's really what it's all about, is the government being in charge of business and suffocating business and taking its money. But anyway, I really like him. I really highly recommend. I'll put a link in the video to Richard Lindzer on his website and on some more of his videos where he talks more eloquently about the actual facts themselves.
Lindzen.
Lindzen. I keep saying Lindzer, don't I?
Yes, you do.
That's because I used to date somebody named
This is
Lindzer.
just like Deborah and Dale.
Her name was Rachel Lindzer.
Was it? Was her name?
Yeah, she had nice breasts.
Congratulations, Rachel. You are now immortalized.
Oh, no, I didn't say her name, did
You
I?
most certainly did.
Sorry, Rach. You did have nice breasts. I hope they're still good.
Damon approves of this message.
All right, later, y'all.